I knew something was wrong the moment my key wouldn't turn. It was the same key I'd used for 9 years. The same key that had opened that office door every morning before sunrise, when the city was still quiet and the janitors were the only witnesses to ambition. I tried again, slower this time. Nothing. Then I noticed the glass. My name was gone. Where it used to read Harrison and Cole Consulting, there was only one name left. Cole Consulting Group. And just like that, my life cracked open without a sound. I'm not the kind of man who came from comfort. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house outside Dayton, Ohio, with a father who worked rotating shifts at a stamping plant and a mother who clipped coupons like it was a second job. Nothing in our house was wasted, not food, not time, not energy. You earned your place. You earned your word. And once you gave it, it meant something. That belief followed me everywhere. I met Tom Cole in my late 20s. We were both hungry, but in different ways. I was hungry for stability, a life where my hands built something solid that couldn't be taken away overnight. Tom was hungry for recognition. Applause. The feeling of being the smartest man in the room. We met at a small business networking breakfast in Columbus. Bad coffee. Plastic name tags. Forced smiles. He walked straight up to me, shook my hand like we were old friends, and said, "You look like a man who actually knows how to get things done." I liked that. Tom had ideas. Big ones. He could sell ice to a man in a snowstorm. What he didn't have was follow-through. I had that in excess. I worked nights. Weekends. Holidays. While Tom talked vision, I handled contracts, logistics, client relationships, and operations. He called it division of strengths. I called it teamwork. We started the company in a rented office above a pawn shop. Second floor. Flickering lights. No elevator. Our first desk was a door laid across 2 filing cabinets. I brought my own chair from home. Those early years were brutal. I missed birthdays. Anniversaries. My first marriage didn't survive that phase of my life. Too many late nights, too many promises of just one more year and it'll get easier. It didn't. Not then. But the company grew. Clients trusted us because I showed up. Every time. I remembered their kids' names. I answered calls at midnight. When something went wrong, I didn't hide behind emails or assistants, I drove out and fixed it myself. Tom was the face. I was the spine. By year 5, we had real offices. By year 7, we had national clients. By year 9, banks were calling us. And that's when things started to change. Tom started talking about scaling without friction. About leaning into leadership. About how I was too operational and needed to think bigger. He said betrayal with a smile. I didn't recognize it then. He began holding meetings without me. Small ones at first. Strategy sessions. Just brainstorming, he said. I trusted him. He was my best friend. ID stood beside him at his wedding. Head held my shoulder when my father died. Why wouldn't I trust him? The lawyers came next. Then the consultants. Then the restructuring language. I remember the night he asked me to sign a document just to streamline decision-making. He poured bourbon like it was a celebration. I read every line. Nothing seemed dangerous. Minor adjustments. Temporary authority. I signed because partnership meant trust. That was my mistake. Clients started acting strange. Hesitant. Distant. One long-time account quietly stopped returning my calls. Another told me they'd been reassigned internally. I assumed it was growth pains. Then payroll bounced. I confronted Tom. He laughed it off. Blamed accounting. Promised it would be fixed by Monday. Monday came with silence. That Tuesday morning, the locked door, the missing name, it all finally made sense. I stood there for a long time. Watching employees ID hired walk past me like I was a stranger. Watching my own reflection in the glass where my identity used to be etched. Security arrived. Not angry. Just uncomfortable. "Sir, you're not authorized to be here." That's how I found out. Tom had transferred assets. Clients. Accounts. Debt. All of it. He kept the profit. I inherited the liability. By the end of that month, I was facing lawsuits I didn't even know existed. Vendors ID never spoken to were demanding payment. My credit was wrecked. My reputation, the thing I valued most, was being dragged through court filings and whispers. Friends stopped calling. Family told me to let it go. My own brother sat across from me at a diner in Dayton and said, "Maybe it's time to accept it. Start over. Get a regular job. You're not young anymore." I nodded. Paid the check. Didn't argue. But something inside me hardened that day. Not anger. Not revenge. Resolve. Because I didn't lose everything due to weakness. I lost it because I trusted too deeply, and I learned. A week later, I packed one suitcase. No furniture. No trophies. No reminders. I left Ohio before dawn, crossed state lines with nothing but debt, experience, and a quiet promise to myself. If I ever built something again, it would be unstealable. I crossed the state line at 3:17 in the morning. I remember the time because I'd been staring at the dashboard clock for hours, watching the minutes crawl by like they were dragging something heavy behind them. The highway was empty, the kind of empty that only exists when most of the world is asleep and the rest doesn't know you're falling apart. One suitcase lay in the back seat. Everything I still owned that mattered fit inside it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't call anyone. I just drove. People like to imagine that starting over feels dramatic, some big emotional reset, a symbolic moment where the past burns away in the rearview mirror. That's not how it works. Starting over feels quiet. Cold. Lonely. It feels like you're carrying a lifetime of lessons in your chest and nowhere obvious to put them down. I chose Colorado for one reason. No one knew me there. No rumors. No lawsuits attached to my name. No awkward sympathy. I needed a clean slate more than I needed comfort. Denver wasn't cheap, but it was growing, and growth meant opportunity for people willing to work without guarantees. I pulled into the city just before sunrise and parked outside a 24-hour diner off Colfax. The neon sign flickered like it had seen better decades. I sat there for a long time before going inside, gripping the steering wheel like if I let go, something important might slip away. The waitress didn't ask questions. She poured coffee, slid over a laminated menu, and called me hon like I belonged there. That cup of coffee was the first thing I'd paid for without anxiety in weeks. I rented a room from a retired electrician named Ron. Basement level. Low ceiling. Smelled faintly of motor oil and old books. He charged cash, didn't care about my past, and only asked two things. No noise after 10, and always lock the door. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. The first 6 months were humbling. I took consulting gigs under a different structure, no partners, no shared authority, no handshake deals. Everything in writing. Everything clean. I worked contract to contract, often for companies that didn't know what they had or what they were bleeding. I charged less than I was worth and worked twice as hard as I used to. Some nights I'd come back to that basement room so tired my hands would shake when I tried to unlock the door. I ate standing up. Slept in short bursts. Read case law and business failures like other men read novels. I wasn't rebuilding a company. I was rebuilding myself. There were moments, quiet ones, where doubt crept in. When I'd lie on that narrow bed staring at the ceiling pipes and wonder if my brother had been right. If maybe I should have accepted a mid-level operations job somewhere and let the fire die out. But then I'd remember Tom's smile the day he poured that bourbon. The way trust can be weaponized. And the doubt would harden into focus. Year 1 passed without fanfare. No big wins. No headlines. Just steady work and a reputation for fixing things other people couldn't. I didn't market myself loudly. I let results speak. Word travels faster than ads when you do your job well. By year 3, I incorporated. Not flashy. No big office. Just a lean operation built on principles I carved into myself after the fall. No partners. No shared control. No shortcuts. Clients came to me because their businesses were broken in ways spreadsheets couldn't explain. Culture rot. Operational chaos. Leadership blind spots. I wasn't the cheapest option anymore, I was the last call before failure. I learned to say no. That was new. I said no to fast money. No to expansion that relied on borrowed trust. No to anyone who wanted a piece of ownership instead of paying for value. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ground beneath me stabilized. I hired my first employee in year 4, a quiet woman named Elaine who cared about details the way surgeons do. I gave her autonomy and clarity. She gave me loyalty and precision. That balance mattered. By year 6, we had an office. Nothing fancy. Brick building. 2 floors. Windows that opened. My name on the door, alone this time. I never forgot what it felt like to see it disappear. The lawsuits back in Ohio eventually resolved. Ugly, expensive, but survivable. I paid what I owed, fought what was false, and never once spoke Tom's name publicly. Silence is louder than people realize. Sometimes, late at night, I'd look up his company online. Watch their press releases. Their growth curves. Their awards. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt patience. Because I knew something most people don't learn until it's too late. Businesses built on deception age faster than they grow. Year 10 came quietly. By then, my firm had a reputation in 3 states. Clean books. Zero debt. Clients who stayed because they wanted to, not because contracts trapped them. That's when the call came. An acquisition inquiry. Confidential. Strategic. The target company was struggling, internal fractures, leadership turnover, legal exposure. The kind of company I specialized in stabilizing or dismantling. When the name crossed my screen, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It was Tom's company. The same one that had erased my name from glass a decade earlier. Life doesn't circle back for revenge. It circles back for reckoning. I didn't rush the decision. I reviewed the numbers like a stranger. Evaluated risk. Legal exposure. Cultural decay. I sent a team, not myself, to do initial assessments. Everything I suspected was there. Clients bleeding out. Senior staff burned out. Trust fractured beyond repair. Tom wasn't listed as CEO anymore. Just founder. Titles get smaller when consequences arrive. The board wanted stability. Credibility. Someone who could save what was left. They wanted me. I agreed to talks. Not because I needed closure. Because ID earned the position to choose. The email didn't say his name. That was the first thing I noticed. No Tom. No forced familiarity. No nostalgia dressed up as professionalism. Just a subject line that read: confidential acquisition discussion, and a sender address routed through a third-party advisory firm. That told me everything I needed to know. People don't hide behind intermediaries when they're strong. They do it when pride is all they have left. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit for 3 days while I went about my work. Client calls. Staff meetings. The ordinary rhythm of a company built on order instead of urgency. I wanted to see if the past still had the power to distract me. It didn't. When I finally replied, my message was short and clean. Happy to review materials. Please send over preliminary financials and legal disclosures. No emotion. No history. Just business. The data arrived within hours. That told me something too. They were desperate. I spent a weekend alone in the office going through the files. No assistants. No advisors. Just me, legal pads, and 10 years of distance between the man I was and the one reading those numbers now. The company was rotting from the inside. On paper, revenue still looked respectable. But margins were thin, contracts were shaky, and client churn had been quietly accelerating for years. Employee turnover was brutal, especially at the middle management level, the layer that usually absorbs the pressure from above. That layer had collapsed. There were lawsuits buried in footnotes. Deferred liabilities disguised as strategic obligations. The kind of accounting tricks that don't fool regulators, just delay them. And Tom? Tom was still there. Sort of. Founder. Visionary. Advisory role. The man who once couldn't function without me was now surrounded by consultants trying to replace a spine with slide decks. I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. 10 years earlier, this company had crushed me without a second thought. Now it was bleeding quietly, hoping I wouldn't notice where the wounds came from. We agreed to a preliminary meeting in Chicago. Neutral ground. Glass building. Polished conference room. The kind of place where everything smells faintly like money and nothing feels personal. I arrived early. Always did. When Tom walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Had aged hard. The confidence was still there, but it was brittle, stretched thin over exhaustion. His hair was thinner. His posture less certain. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. Didn't think you'd take the meeting, he said, extending his hand. I shook it. Not because I forgave him. But because I no longer needed to punish him. I take meetings that make sense, I replied. The consultants talked first. Synergies. Market alignment. Strategic continuity. Words designed to keep everyone from saying what mattered. Finally, Tom spoke. We made mistakes, he said carefully. We grew too fast. Trusted the wrong people. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I asked questions. Hard ones. Specific ones. About client loss. About internal controls. About the lawsuits he avoided mentioning. He answered like a man trying to walk across ice he knew was cracking. At one point, he paused and looked directly at me. You always were better at this part, he said. Seeing the cracks before they opened. I didn't respond. Because what I wanted to say wouldn't have helped anyone. The truth was simple. I didn't need the acquisition. My company was strong. Profitable. Clean. This deal wouldn't change my life. But it would change theirs. And that imbalance mattered. I went home and thought about it for a long time. Not about revenge. That wasn't interesting anymore. Revenge keeps you tethered to the past. I thought about meaning. About what it would feel like to walk back into that building, not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as the owner. To see my name return not because I demanded it, but because it belonged there. In the end, I made an offer. Fair. Firm. Unforgiving. They accepted within 48 hours. Due diligence took months. Every skeleton came out. Every hidden debt. Every internal betrayal Tom pretended not to see. I didn't shield him from it. I didn't expose him either. I let truth do what it always does when given time and light. When the acquisition closed, there was no celebration. No press release with my face on it. No victory lap. Just signatures. And silence. Tom stayed on for 90 days in an advisory role. Contractual obligation. I kept my distance. Let him walk the halls knowing he no longer controlled the gravity there. One evening, near the end of his term, he asked to talk. Just us. We sat in the same conference room where had once convinced me to sign my future away. I never thought you'd come back, he said quietly. I didn't, I replied. I built something else. He nodded. You know, I didn't plan for it to end like it did. I looked at him then, really looked. A man who had confused charisma with character. Vision with ownership. Control with leadership. It always ends like that, I said. Just not always on schedule. He swallowed. Do you hate me? I considered the question. No, I said. I outgrew you. That was the last conversation we ever had. The first thing I did after he left was change the culture. Not slogans. Not speeches. Systems. Clear authority. Transparent incentives. Real accountability. I promoted quietly competent people who'd been overlooked in favor of louder ones. I listened more than I spoke. Employees noticed. Clients noticed too. Stability has a signature. People recognize it when it arrives. Within a year, the company was profitable again, not because of growth, but because of integrity. Waste cut. Trust restored. Decisions made with long-term weight instead of quarterly fear. One afternoon, I stood in the lobby and looked at the glass. My name was there. Not because I demanded it. Because it had earned its way back. The strange thing about winning the long game is how quiet it feels. There was no rush of triumph when the dust settled. No sense of justice delivered with a cinematic snap. Most mornings, I walked into the building early, same as I always had, coffee in hand, lights still off, and felt normal. That's how I knew I'd done it right. Power that needs noise is fragile. Real control settles into silence. The company changed slowly, the way bones heal after a clean break. At first, people were cautious around me. Not afraid, wary. They'd lived through years of shifting directives, sudden restructures, promises that expired faster than they were made. Trust doesn't come back because you ask for it. It comes back when people notice they're no longer bracing for impact. I didn't announce reforms. I just stopped tolerating confusion. Meetings ended with decisions. Decisions had owners. Owners had timelines. And when something failed, we talked about it plainly, no scapegoats, no theatrics. People learned quickly that honesty was no longer punished. That alone changed everything. I kept my original company separate. Different brand. Different leadership team. Clean walls between the two. I didn't want an empire. I wanted clarity. Over time, the old firm stabilized enough that I could step back and let capable people run it. That's when something unexpected happened. People started telling me the truth. Not the polite version. Not the safe version. The real one. Senior managers admitted they'd stayed because they didn't know where else to go. Junior staff confessed they'd been quietly interviewing for years. One woman in finance broke down in my office and said, "This is the first time I don't feel like I'm about to be blamed for something I didn't do." I listened. Because 10 years earlier, no one had listened to me. Tom faded from memory faster than I expected. Not because I forced him out of the story, but because once the chaos left, he no longer mattered. That's the part people don't understand about betrayal. It only has power as long as it defines the present. Once it doesn't, it becomes background noise. Occasionally, someone new would join the company and recognize my name from old articles or dusty legal filings. They'd ask carefully, usually after hours, "Is it true you used to be partners?" I'd nod. That must have been they'd search for the word. Expensive, I'd say. And leave it at that. I didn't need to be understood. I needed to be accurate. Around year 9 of my second life, the one I'd built from the ground up, I bought a house. Nothing flashy. Just a solid place outside Boulder. Wood floors. A porch that caught the late afternoon sun. The kind of house that feels earned, not showcased. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a takeout container and realized I didn't feel like I was proving anything anymore. That scared me a little. When your whole life has been built on survival and rebuilding, stillness feels unfamiliar. Like standing on frozen water, waiting to hear a crack that never comes. It took time to accept that peace wasn't temporary. I got a call one afternoon from my brother, the same one who'd told me to start over as a regular worker. "I hear you bought the company," he said. "Which one?" He laughed. "Fair enough." There was a pause. "I was wrong, you know." I didn't rush to fill the silence. "I thought you were done," he continued. I thought what happened broke you." "It did," I said. "Just not in the way you expected." He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. Admitting you misjudged a man who rebuilt himself from ashes is apology enough. The last legal document from the old lawsuits was filed and closed that same year. 10 years, almost to the month, after my name disappeared from glass. I printed the confirmation, folded it once, and put it in a drawer. Not a trophy. Just a marker. That night, I poured a drink and sat on the porch watching the light fade over the mountains. No emails. No calls. No emergencies. And for the first time since my 30s, I allowed myself to ask a question I'd avoided for years. What now? The answer wasn't bigger. It was better. I began mentoring quietly. No social media posts. No speeches. Just conversations with men and women who'd been burned by partners, systems, or their own misplaced trust. I told them the truth no one had told me. You don't recover by replacing what you lost. You recover by becoming someone it can't happen to again. Some listened. Some didn't. The ones who did changed their lives. A decade after I'd driven out of Ohio with one suitcase, I returned. Not for business. For closure. I drove past the old building, the one above the pawn shop. It was a yoga studio now. Soft lighting. Calm music. Windows wide open. I stood across the street for a while, hands in my pockets, and felt nothing. No anger. No nostalgia. Just gratitude. Because if that door had never locked me out, I might stayed small without realizing it. That night, back in Colorado, I slept deeply. The kind of sleep you only get when there's nothing left to chase and nothing left to fear. The next morning, I woke up knowing the story was almost complete. One more chapter left. The board meeting ended without applause. No one stood. No one shook hands like they'd just witnessed history. Papers were gathered, chairs slid back softly, and people filtered out with the calm efficiency of adults who had learned not to celebrate too early. I stayed seated. Alone in the room, I looked at the signatures on the final document, the last formal confirmation that the company which once erased me now belonged to me outright. Not symbolically. Not emotionally. Legally. Completely. 10 years to the month. That kind of symmetry doesn't feel poetic when you're living it. It feels heavy. Like setting down a pack you didn't realize had been cutting into your shoulders until it was finally gone. I didn't walk the halls afterward. I went outside instead. The city noise wrapped around me, traffic, voices, construction, life moving forward without waiting for anyone's personal resolution. That felt right. The world doesn't pause for your closure. It keeps going, and you either move with it or get dragged. I thought about the man I'd been when I lost everything. The one who stood in front of a locked door wondering how loyalty had turned into a liability. The one who believed that working harder was always the answer, even when the problem was trust placed in the wrong hands. That man didn't fail. He just didn't know what he was building yet. I never fired everyone. That surprises people when they hear the story. They expect scorched earth, mass layoffs, symbolic purges, a dramatic reordering of power. That's how insecure leaders operate. They confuse control with destruction. I kept the ones who stayed honest in a dishonest system. Some of them cried when I told them their jobs were safe. Grown men and women who'd spent years learning to keep their heads down suddenly realized they didn't have to. That's when I understood something important. Betrayal doesn't just break the person it's aimed at. It poisons everyone forced to live inside it. Cleaning that up mattered more than punishing the past. Tom never contacted me again. I heard through the industry that he moved south. Tried a few smaller ventures. Advisory roles that didn't last. People like him don't adapt well when charisma stops opening doors. I didn't wish him harm. I also didn't wish him redemption. Some lessons are meant to be permanent. A year after the acquisition, I stepped back. Not away, just back. I put strong leaders in place. People who didn't need me hovering to make good decisions. People who understood that authority isn't something you assert, it's something others grant when you've proven you won't abuse it. My days got quieter. Mornings on the porch. Long walks. Books I'd meant to read for decades. Conversations that didn't revolve around leverage or risk mitigation. One afternoon, a young consultant I mentored asked me a question I recognized instantly, because it was the one I'd never had the courage to ask when I needed it most. If you could go back, he said, would you stop it from happening? I didn't answer right away. Because the honest answer wasn't comforting. No, I said finally. I'd stop myself from staying the same afterward. He frowned. You don't regret it? I regret the cost, I said. Not the transformation. That's the part no one prepares you for. Sometimes the thing that destroys your life is the only thing capable of rebuilding it correctly. I went back to Ohio one last time that fall. Not for business. Not for nostalgia. I drove the same roads, ate at the same diner, stood in front of the same building where my name once vanished. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pride. I felt complete. Loss has a way of clarifying what actually belongs to you. Money comes and goes. Reputation can be rebuilt. Even time, in its own way, can be re-earned through intention. But character? That's either forged or revealed under pressure. Mine had been forged. I keep that first suitcase in my closet. Still scuffed. Still smells faintly like road dust and old fabric. Eve never opened it since the day I unpacked it in that basement room. Not because I'm sentimental. Because I don't need reminders. Every decision I make now carries the imprint of that loss, not as fear, but as discipline. I don't rush trust. I don't confuse charm with competence. And I never again build anything I can't stand alone inside. People ask me sometimes what success feels like now. I tell them the truth. It feels like sleeping without checking your phone. It feels like signing your name and knowing it can't be erased. It feels like walking away from the fire and not smelling smoke anymore. And if there's one thing I've learned, the thing I'd leave behind if I could carve it into stone, it's this. What's built on trust alone can be stolen. What's built on strength, clarity, and self-respect can only be earned.